With that, we will go to our next lawmaker, and this actually will be our last lawmaker before I give some concluding remarks. It's Representative Ritchie Torres. He is a leading voice in the Congress for human rights, civil rights, justice, equality, and speaking out against racism and anti-Semitism. I'm a huge fan of his. I love seeing his voice on Twitter and on Instagram. As I said before, there are some people in these terrible times who have risen to the moment after October 7th when others are silent. We heard from Asida Kanko, and now Ritchie Torres, someone who's been incredibly outspoken. And we're really honored, Congressman Torres, that you took the time to send us your participation by video. You have the floor.
Hello, I'm Congressman Ritchie Torres from New York 15 in the Bronx. Associate Justice Robert Jackson served as the chief prosecutor in the Nuremberg trials. In his opening statement, he said, quote, "The wrongs which we seek to condemn and punish are so calculated, so malignant, so devastating, that we cannot tolerate their being ignored because we cannot survive their being repeated." Those same words should be said about October 7th. Israel cannot tolerate October 7th being ignored because the Jewish state cannot survive it being repeated. For me, October 7th was a crime against humanity so barbaric that it cannot be ignored. It cannot go unpunished. Hamas must be removed from power, and the perpetrators of October 7th must be brought to justice. Israel has a right to defend itself against Hamas in the aftermath of October 7th, for the same reason the United States had a right to defend itself against Al-Qaeda in the aftermath of 9/11. Self-defense is the right and responsibility and raison d'etre of every nation state, including the Jewish nation state. I want to commend Hillel Neuer for turning the light of truth upon the systemic anti-Semitism of UNRWA and the larger Palestinian refugee industrial complex. Not only did your reporting and Israeli intelligence implicate several UNRWA employees on October 7th, but UNRWA itself has long been indoctrinating its students with anti-Israel and anti-Jewish hate. Let me be clear. Hate will never bring peace. It will only bring more violence and more senseless suffering. We must stop perpetuating the ideologies and the institutions that perpetuate hate, pure and simple. We must be clear-eyed about the incestuous relationship between Hamas and UNRWA. Hamas exists not to govern Palestinians in Gaza, but to murder Jews in Israel. UNRWA, long funded by Western tax dollars, has long been governing Gaza at the behest of Hamas, so that Hamas, which sees governing as a mere distraction, could dedicate itself to the murder of Jews in Israel, the construction of terror tunnels in Gaza, and the militarization of its own civilian population and civilian infrastructure. That the international community would cut a deal with the devil is so scandalous and shocking in its stupidity that it leaves one speechless. But that deal with the devil, which has persisted for far too long, is finally collapsing under the weight of its own corruption, and rightly so. Hamas must be removed from power. The perpetrators of October 7th must be brought to justice. And UNRWA, long a purveyor of anti-Israel and anti-Jewish hate, must be replaced. It should be possible for the international community to provide urgently needed humanitarian aid to Palestinians in distress without inciting hate and violence against Israelis and Jews. A sustainable peace will require a demilitarization and a de-Hamasification of the Gaza Strip. It will require a de-radicalization of Gazan civil society, which for far too long has been miseducated by UNRWA and manipulated by its lies. A wise person once said, if you do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result, that is the definition of insanity. The time has come to end the insanity of an ideology that does not celebrate the life of Palestinians, but instead celebrates the death of Jews. We must end the hate, and we must end the insanity.
Thank you, Congressman Ritchie Torres, for your very powerful remarks. We heard earlier from Chairman Chris Smith from the Republican Party. We now have your voice as a leading voice in the Democratic Party. Indeed, as Ambassador David Satterfield, the U.S. envoy in humanitarian affairs for the Middle East, really for Gaza, said it is his understanding that from both parties, there is no longer a will to fund UNRWA. The opposite, there is a clear will not to fund UNRWA. We're seeing it in legislation. And again, in this event, we had both Republican and Democratic voices. And those who voted for Chris Smith's bill in the House Foreign Affairs Committee were both Republicans and Democrats. This is very significant as we move forward.